My parents sued me to force the sale of my apartment for my cheating sister's divorce. Then Mom screamed, "You've destroyed this entire family. I hope that stupid apartment is worth losing everyone who actually loves you." But what I did next cost them everything and taught them the most expensive lesson of their lives. Standing outside that courthouse in downtown Columbus after winning my case, watching my parents storm off in defeat, I knew this was just the beginning. They'd made the strategic mistake of thinking I was still the pushover older brother who'd always caved to family pressure. What they didn't realize was that I'd been documenting everything for months, building an ironclad defense while they were busy plotting how to steal my home. Let me explain how I got here, because the financial stakes in this situation were absolutely massive. My $250,000 downtown Columbus condo wasn't just my home. It represented 5 years of brutal sacrifice. 60-hour weeks at Henderson & Associates accounting firm, making $78,000 annually as a senior tax specialist. Living on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for 2 straight years to save that $50,000 down payment. Skipping vacations, driving a beat-up Honda Civic, and watching every single penny while my sister Savannah lived it up as a trophy wife. I'm James, 29 years old, and I've always been the responsible one in our family. My parents, Robert and Linda, are both 58 and have spent their entire lives making poor financial decisions. Dad works at Midwest Insurance making $52,000 annually, while Mom has bounced between part-time retail jobs her whole life. They've never owned anything outright, always living paycheck to paycheck despite decent combined income. Meanwhile, Savannah, my 26-year-old sister, had married into serious money 2 years earlier. Cameron Blackwell's family owned Blackwell Manufacturing, a 4-generation empire worth an estimated $47 million. Their wedding alone cost more than my annual salary, $120,000 for a 3-day extravaganza at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Columbus. But here's what my family didn't want to acknowledge. Savannah had signed an ironclad prenup that would leave her with absolutely nothing if she cheated. When everything exploded in March of last year, I immediately started thinking strategically instead of emotionally. The moment Savannah confessed to her 8-month affair with Trevor Morrison, Cameron's business partner, I knew this would eventually become my problem. My parents had always used me as their financial safety net whenever their poor decisions caught up with them, and they weren't going to change now. I spent the next 3 weeks documenting every single interaction with my family. Every phone call, every text message, every guilt trip about. Family loyalty got logged in a detailed Excel spreadsheet with timestamps and exact quotes. I photographed every piece of correspondence, recorded conversations, when legally permissible under Ohio's single-party consent law, and created a comprehensive timeline of their escalating demands. The numbers they were throwing around at that family meeting in my parents' Westerville ranch house were staggering. An $85,000 retainer for Morrison & Associates, Ohio's most expensive divorce firm. My parents scraped together $25,000 from their home equity line of credit, which already had them paying 8.5% interest on $45,000 in existing debt. Aunt Dorothy and Uncle Frank pledged another $20,000 from their retirement savings, leaving them $40,000 short. That's when all eyes turned to me and my convenient $250,000 asset. But I'd done my homework on the Blackwell family's legal strategy. I consulted with Patricia Williams, a divorce attorney who'd handled cases against the Blackwell firm before. Her consultation cost me $400, but the information was invaluable. "They've never lost a prenup case in 15 years, she told me bluntly at her office on High Street. Cameron's father has 3 law firms on permanent retainer specifically to protect family wealth. Your sister doesn't have a chance, regardless of who represents her. That's when I realized my family was asking me to sacrifice my financial future for a case that was already lost. They wanted me to sell my home to pay for legal representation that couldn't possibly win against a prenup that Savannah had voluntarily signed after consulting with her own attorney. When the certified letter arrived at my condo with the lawsuit paperwork 3 weeks later, I was actually relieved. The legal complaint alleged unjust enrichment and breach of implied family contract, claiming my parents had provided 18 years of financial support that created a legal obligation for me to reciprocate. They'd actually itemized childhood expenses, diapers, food, clothing, even my bicycle from 7th grade. The total came to $347,000, which they argued I owed them with 6% annual interest. I hired Rebecca Martinez immediately after researching family law attorneys in Columbus. Her retainer was $5,000, but she specialized in frivolous family lawsuits and had a 96% success rate in these types of cases. "This is actually hilarious," she said, reviewing their complaint in her office. "Parents can't retroactively bill their adult children for basic child care required by law. We're going to destroy them in court." The discovery phase was where my strategic documentation really paid off. While my parents demanded my financial records, I voluntarily provided everything. Every bank statement since age 18, every pay stub, every receipt showing how I'd saved for that condo completely independently. I even included records of the $3,400 I'd loaned my parents over the years for various emergencies, money they'd never bothered repaying despite multiple reminders. But here's where I got truly strategic. I hired a private investigator named Marcus Chen for $20,800 to dig into my parents' financial situation. What he uncovered was devastating. They had already taken out $23,000 in high-interest predatory loans at 18% APR to pay for their own legal fees. They were hemorrhaging money they didn't have, fighting a case they couldn't win, all while their financial situation spiraled out of control. Meanwhile, Savannah's divorce proceeded exactly as Patricia had predicted. Cameron's legal team presented the prenup, documented the affair with phone records and hotel receipts, and the judge ruled in their favor within 3 hours. Savannah walked away with her personal belongings and a $2,000 per month alimony payment for exactly 1 year, total value $24,000. My parents had been willing to force me to sell my home to pay $85,000 in legal fees for a settlement worth less than $25,000. The court hearing took place on a Tuesday morning in Franklin County Family Court. I showed up with Rebecca and 3 binders of evidence: financial independence records, documentation of my parents' manipulations tactics, and expert testimony about the frivolous nature of their claims. My parents arrived with their attorney, Thomas Hoffman, who charged them $450 per hour for what everyone knew was an unwinnable case. Judge Patricia Morrison took one look at the evidence and delivered a scathing ruling. This court finds no legal basis for the plaintiff's claims. Parents cannot sue their adult children for the costs of basic child care. Furthermore, the defendant has demonstrated complete financial independence since age 18, including lending money to the plaintiffs that was never repaid. This case is dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiffs will pay all court costs and the defendant's attorney fees. The total judgment against my parents was $12,400 in my legal fees, plus $3,200 in court costs. But that was just the beginning of their financial catastrophe. Within 2 weeks of the court ruling, the consequences started cascading. My parents' high-interest loans came due, requiring monthly payments of $147 they couldn't make on Dad's $52,000 salary. The legal fees had drained their savings account completely, and they'd maxed out their home equity line of credit at $70,000. Uncle Frank and Aunt Dorothy demanded immediate repayment of their $20,000 contribution, threatening their own lawsuit when my parents couldn't pay. My grandmother called me from her retirement community in Sarasota, Florida, with the most expensive news yet. She'd changed her will, removing my parents as beneficiaries and leaving her entire $180,000 estate to me instead. "Your mother's lawsuit was the final straw," she told me during our phone conversation. "I won't reward this kind of behavior. I'm also cutting off the $500 monthly assistance I've been sending them." 6 months after the court ruling, Aunt Dorothy reached out desperately through a phone call to my office. My parents were facing foreclosure on their $190,000 home in Westerville. The accumulated debt from their failed lawsuit, legal fees, court costs, high-interest loans, and lost income from Dad's stress-related health problems totaled over $67,000. They were drowning financially, all because they'd chosen litigation over accepting my decision. When Mom called begging for help before the foreclosure, I was ready with exact numbers. "You sued me for $250,000 worth of property to pay for an $85,000 lawyer for a case that settled for $24,000. You spent $67,000 on legal fees and interest payments trying to steal my home. Now you want me to bail you out of the consequences of those choices? The mathematical reality was undeniable. Their lawsuit had cost them more money than they'd ever hoped to gain from forcing me to sell. They'd turned a simple no into a financial disaster that consumed their house, their savings, and their relationship with their own mother. But the consequences kept compounding over the following months. Dad's stress-induced health problems, high blood pressure, and anxiety attacks led to his termination from Midwest Insurance, where he'd worked for 23 years. His annual $52,000 salary disappeared just as their debt payments peaked. Mom, at 58, had to take a 12-per-hour retail job at Target to help cover basic expenses. Savannah moved back into my parents' house with her newborn daughter, Destiny, adding 3 more mouths to feed on an income that couldn't support 2 people. The married man who'd fathered her child, a local businessman named Richard Hayes, had disappeared completely after the birth, leaving no financial support despite Savannah's attempts to contact him through mutual friends. I tracked every consequence in my detailed spreadsheet. A $190,000 house lost to foreclosure, $67,000 in lawsuit-related debt, $52,000 in lost annual income, $180,000 disinherited from grandmother's estate, $6,000 annually in lost assistance from grandmother. Total financial impact was $495,000, all because they couldn't accept a simple no when I refused to sell my home. 2 years later, I received an update through my friend Kyle, who still lived in our old neighborhood and occasionally saw my family at the grocery store. Dad was working part-time at Home Depot for $14 per hour, struggling with his health issues. Mom had developed stress-related health problems that required medication they could barely afford on their limited income. Savannah was cycling through minimum wage jobs while trying to care for 2-year-old Destiny in their cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a rough part of town. Meanwhile, my strategic decisions had paid off spectacularly. My condo appreciated to $312,000, representing $62,000 in equity gains. My tax preparation side business generated an additional $18,000 annually from clients I'd gained through referrals. Grandmother's inheritance, which I received after she passed away peacefully 8 months ago, allowed me to purchase a duplex rental property that produces $1,400 monthly passive income. Total financial improvement was $398,000 in net worth gains over the same period. The most satisfying part wasn't the money. It was proving that strategic thinking beats emotional manipulation every single time. While my parents were burning through their life savings on a frivolous lawsuit, I was building wealth and protecting my future. They'd gambled everything on, forcing me to sacrifice my financial security for Savannah's poor choices, and they'd lost spectacularly. When Kyle suggested I might consider helping them now, 3 years after the lawsuit, I pulled out my phone and showed him the numbers in my tracking spreadsheet. They sued me for $347,000, claiming I owed them for childhood expenses. That lawsuit cost them $495,000 in total financial consequences. They literally spent more money trying to steal my home than my childhood allegedly cost them. Last month, I received a desperate letter from Mom, forwarded through Kyle since I'd blocked their direct communications. She was begging for help with Destiny's medical expenses. The child had developed asthma and needed regular treatments they couldn't afford. The letter was full of guilt trips about innocent children suffering and family obligations. I calculated the numbers. Destiny's medical expenses would cost approximately $200 monthly. Over 18 years, that's $43,200. My parents had thrown away nearly $500,000 trying to force me to sell my home, but now wanted me to fund their granddaughter's health care. The irony was staggering. My response was simple. I donated $5,000 directly to the children's hospital where Destiny receives treatment, earmarked specifically for her care. This ensured the money went to medical expenses rather than being mismanaged by my parents. I also set up a small trust fund with $25,000 from my grandmother's inheritance, accessible only for Destiny's education and healthcare needs when she turns 18. The lesson here is crystal clear. Document everything, think strategically, and never let family guilt override mathematical reality. My parents made their choices based on emotion and entitlement. I made mine based on evidence and long-term financial planning. The results speak for themselves. That $250,000 condo they wanted me to sacrifice, it's now worth $312,000 and represents the foundation of a real estate portfolio they'll never be able to build. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for manipulative family members is let them face the full financial consequences of their choices. And sometimes the smartest thing you can do for yourself is refuse to fund other people's disasters with your own financial future. Sometimes the best lesson you can teach someone is that actions have consequences. And sometimes the most expensive lesson is the one that finally sticks.